Imagine sitting at your desk, watching a coworker wrap up their very last day of work. They are only 58 years old, smiling, and looking completely relaxed about the future. Meanwhile, you are quietly staring at a calculator, trying to figure out if you can even afford to stop working by the time you turn 70. It is a stressful feeling, but it highlights a massive financial truth. A single person who starts investing $500 a month at age 35 can retire with over $260,000 more than someone who waits until age 40. They invest the exact same amount of money each month, but that small 5-year head start completely changes the game. What most people do not understand about saving $500 a month isn't the basic math. It is what that math is actually doing underneath the surface, out of sight, that changes everything. I spend my time analyzing long-term investing data so regular people do not have to wade through boring spreadsheets and confusing financial advice just to find the truth. If you want to know exactly what consistent investing actually produces over different time horizons, not the overly optimistic version but the real one, make sure to hit subscribe, because this channel always runs the numbers straight. By the end of this video, you will know precisely what $500 a month builds over 10, 20, and 30 years. You will see why the final numbers are probably both higher and more complicated than you think. Best of all, you will discover the single biggest variable that most people completely ignore when planning their future. Most people assume that building serious wealth requires investing serious money. They look at a number like $500 a month and think it is a respectable habit, but not a life-changing one. The general belief is that real wealth is only built by people who can afford to put away $2,000 or $3,000 every single month. It is a very logical thing to believe, because the math seems obvious on the surface. We are taught that bigger inputs naturally lead to bigger outputs, so it makes sense to think small amounts only lead to small results. But that assumption is completely wrong. The variable that actually determines your financial outcome is not how much money you invest each month. Instead, it is how long compound growth has been running before you finally need to touch the money. Time changes the math in ways that do not seem possible at first glance. For example, if you invest $500 a month for 30 years, you do not just end up with 50% more than someone who invests $500 a month for 20 years. You actually end up with roughly 3 times as much money. This happens because of how growth stacks on top of growth. The last decade of compounding does far more heavy lifting than the first 2 decades combined. In the beginning, your money grows slowly because the total balance is small. But by year 20, the pile of money is big enough that the interest it earns makes more money than you are actually contributing from your paycheck. Because of this, the correct way to think about your finances changes completely. The most powerful financial decision you will ever make is not the exact dollar amount you invest. It is how early you start doing it, and how consistently you leave it alone to do its work. To truly understand how this works, you need to know 3 major rules that smart long-term investors use every day. These rules help cut through the confusion and show you exactly what is happening to your money behind the scenes. The first rule is the 7% real return benchmark. Over a very long time, the average annual return of a broad United States stock market index fund is about 10%. But when you subtract the rising cost of everyday items, which we call inflation, the real return is closer to 7%. This is the number that serious financial planners use for their projections. They avoid the 10% figure even though it sounds much better in news headlines. The reason this matters so much is simple. If you use 10% in your math, your future pile of money will look 40% larger than it will actually be in real life. Using 7% keeps your expectations realistic, so you do not face a bad surprise later on. The second rule is the doubling rule, which is often called the rule of 72. This is a quick shortcut to see how fast your money can grow. You just divide the number 72 by your annual return rate to find out exactly how many years it takes for your money to double in size. If we use our 7% return rate, your money will double roughly every 10 years. This rule exists to make abstract math feel concrete. It means that if you have saved $60,000, that pile of money will grow into $120,000 in a decade without you ever adding another single penny to it. The final rule is the irreversibility principle. Every year you delay starting is not just 12 months of missed payments. It actually removes a full doubling cycle from the very end of your timeline, where your money is supposed to grow the fastest. Some experts explain this in a way that sounds almost impossible. Imagine a 25-year-old who invests $500 a month for just 10 years, and then stops entirely. By the time they turn 65, they can actually end up with more money than a 35-year-old who invests $500 a month for 30 years straight. The math seems so backwards that most people refuse to believe it until they run the numbers themselves. but time is simply more powerful than total cash. While choosing when to start is incredibly important, there is another hidden factor that can quietly ruin your progress. The most overlooked mechanism in the entire financial world is investment fees. Specifically, we need to look at the massive difference between a low fee of 0.05% and a higher fee of 1% over 20 or 30 years on a $500 monthly investment. To see how much this hurts, let us look at the actual numbers. If your money grows at that 7% annual rate we talked about, investing $500 a month over 20 years will grow to approximately $260,000. That is what happens if you use a low-cost index fund that charges a tiny 0.05% fee. Now, let us look at a fund that charges a 1% annual fee instead. This 1% fee is very common in funds where a professional manager picks the stocks, and it is also common in many company retirement plans. With that higher fee, your exact same investment produces roughly $232,000 over those same 20 years. That means there is a gap of approximately $28,000 missing from your pocket. This did not happen because you made different investment decisions or chose bad companies. It happened because of a fee number so incredibly small that it does not even sound real when you read it on a financial paper. If you stretch this timeline out over 30 years, the damage becomes even worse. That exact same fee difference on your $500 monthly contribution creates a final gap of over $90,000. A 1% fee sounds like absolutely nothing when you first hear it. But over 3 decades, that tiny percentage ends up costing you more than a full year of salary for most average workers. It takes your hard-earned money quietly, invisibly, and automatically, without you ever getting a bill in the mail. To really see how your money changes over time, we can look at a ladder of different scenarios. Every single one of these scenarios is based on investing $500 a month, with that same 7% real annual return we discussed. The only thing that changes from one step to the next is how many years you let the money grow. On the first tier of the ladder, we look at what happens after 5 years. At this point, your total contributions out of your own pocket add up to $30,000. The final value of your account is approximately $35,800. If you look closely at these numbers, you can see that compound growth has barely engaged yet. You are essentially just seeing your own saved money plus some modest extra returns. This 5-year mark is the exact stage where most people get discouraged and quit. They feel like they are working hard to save money, but the math is not doing anything magical yet. But if you keep going to the second tier, which is 10 years, things begin to change. Your total contributions over a decade add up to $60,000. However, the final value of your account is now approximately $86,400. You have officially crossed a major threshold where compound growth is generating serious money. You now have roughly $26,000 in pure growth beyond what you personally put in. This is the exciting stage where the strategy really starts proving itself to you. If you climb to the third tier of 20 years, the numbers become truly impressive. Your total contributions over 2 decades add up to $120,000. But the final value of your account has climbed to approximately $260,000. You have more than doubled your money on paper. More importantly, compound growth is now doing most of the heavy lifting. Growth alone has contributed roughly $140,000 of that total pile, which is more than twice the amount of cash you personally invested from your paychecks. This is the powerful level that most retirement-focused investors are targeting. Finally, we reach the 4th tier, which is 30 years of consistent investing. The math here has now become almost uncomfortable to look at because the results are so massive. Over 3 decades, your total contributions add up to $180,000. But because you gave the math enough time to work, the final value of your account jumps to approximately $567,000. Compounding added nearly $390,000 on top of what you saved. At this ultimate stage, the money you did not invest is doing far more work than the money you actually put in. To see how these numbers affect real life, let us look at the stories of 2 different people, Marcus and Jordan. Both of them are 30 years old, and both earn an average salary of $65,000 a year. They have the exact same opportunities, but they make very different choices with their money. Marcus decides to start investing $500 a month immediately. He sets up his bank account to automatically move that money into a low-cost index fund every single month, so he never has to think about it. To make this fit his budget, Marcus keeps his life relatively simple. He drives a modest car that is already fully paid off, and he usually makes his morning coffee at home instead of buying it at a shop. He keeps this simple routine going consistently for 30 years straight. Jordan takes a completely different path. He spends his 30s building what looks like a truly great life from the outside. He rents a nice apartment, drives a brand new car every 4 years, and goes on regular, exciting vacations. But when Jordan finally turns 40 years old, he realizes he needs to get serious about his future. He starts putting away $500 a month, just like Marcus did. Because he started later, Jordan only invests his money for 20 years. By the time both men turn 60 years old, their financial situations look completely different. Marcus has a pile of money worth approximately $567,000. Jordan, on the other hand, only has approximately $260,000. Remember, both of them invested the exact same $500 a month. The only real difference is that Jordan invested for 20 years, while Marcus invested for 30. The final gap between them is a massive $307,000. This is the tragic part of the story. Jordan cannot buy that missing money back at any price, no matter how hard he works or how much he saves now. The one thing he really needed to build true wealth was the one thing he already spent during his 30s, and that was time. Let us take a closer look at Jordan's 10-year delay. This is the specific decade between the ages of 30 and 40, when he invested exactly $0. Most people assume the total cost of his mistake was just the cash he did not save, which adds up to $60,000 in skipped monthly payments. But that is not how money actually works. If you run those missing payments forward, you see a much darker picture. If Jordan had simply invested that $500 a month for those first 10 years at a 7% return, and then left it completely alone to compound for another 20 years, without ever adding another single dollar, that specific pile of money would have grown to approximately $330,000 by the time he turned 60. This means Jordan did not just miss out on $60,000 in simple contributions. He actually missed out on a final outcome of $330,000. This happens because those early years are the exact moments when the compounding engine builds its strongest momentum. When you decide to spend your 30s telling yourself that you will start investing as soon as life calms down, you are making an incredibly expensive mistake. That delay does not just cost you $500 a month right now. It directly strips $330,000 away from you at the retirement finish line. This forces us to reframe how we look at our daily choices. The most expensive financial habit most average people have is not overspending on fancy cars, nice apartments, or luxury vacations. The most expensive habit is treating your 30s like a financial warm-up lap, where your actions do not really count. Now that you understand the math and the cost of waiting, you need to know exactly how to put this information into action. There are 4 specific tactics you can use right now to make sure your money actually grows the way it is supposed to. First, you must automate your contribution on payday, not at the very end of the month. Money that sits in your checking account always finds clever ways to disappear on daily expenses. The only $500 monthly investment that actually survives to compound for 30 years is the one you never saw in your account in the first place. Go into your banking app and set up the transfer to happen the exact same day your paycheck lands. Second, you need to choose the investment fund with the lowest fee first, and then worry about everything else later. For most regular investors, a total stock market index fund or an S&P 500 index fund with an annual fee below 0.10% is the best choice. Do not spend hours trying to pick the perfect mix of different stocks before you have fixed your fees. As we saw earlier, that simple fee decision alone is worth tens of thousands of dollars to your future self. Third, make sure to increase your monthly contribution by 1% of your income every single time you get a raise at work. This is a very smart trick because most people immediately spend their raises on a nicer lifestyle, and then they wonder why their savings never grow even though they earn more money. If you earn $65,000 a year and get a 3% raise, immediately redirect just 1% of that, which is about $54 a month, straight into your investment account. Do this before you get used to having the extra cash. You will not feel any difference in your day-to-day budget, but over 20 years, your account balance certainly will. Finally, never pause your contributions during stock market downturns. This is the exact moment where most average investors accidentally destroy years of hard work. When the stock market drops by 20%, it means stocks are on sale. Your regular $500 monthly contribution suddenly buys 25% more shares than it did when the market was at its highest point. The smart investors who kept putting money in during the bad market years of 2008 and 2020 ended up far richer than the people who got scared, paused their investing, and waited for things to calm down. By the time those scared investors felt safe again, the best buying opportunities had already passed them by. Here is the complication that nobody wants to talk about after looking at all that amazing math. A pile of money worth $567,000 in 30 years is simply not the same thing as having $567,000 in your hand today. Because the price of everyday items slowly goes up over time, a process we call inflation, your money loses some of its buying power. If we assume a normal 3% average inflation rate over the next 3 decades, the actual buying power of your $567,000 will feel closer to $233,000 in today's money. That is still a huge and meaningful amount of savings, but it is very different from the giant headline number we started with. Pretending inflation does not exist is how a lot of financial videos mislead people who honestly deserve accurate information. Sharing this truth does not mean the strategy is bad or invalid. Instead, it clarifies what the strategy actually requires from you. If having the buying power of $233,000 in today's dollars is your personal retirement goal, then investing $500 a month will get you exactly where you need to be. But if you realize that you will need more than that to live comfortably, you now know that you must either invest a higher amount of money each month, start your investing journey even earlier, or do both. The good news is that you now have the real math to make a smart decision, instead of just guessing and hoping for the best. The deepest shift this video should leave you with is not just the simple thought that you should start saving $500 a month. It is a completely new way of looking at your life. You need to realize that every single financial choice you make during your 30s is actually a 30-year decision, whether you treat it that way or not. The real question you need to ask yourself is not whether you can afford to invest $500 a month right now. The true question is whether you can really afford to keep pretending that you will just start saving next year. Note, this video is for educational purposes only, so always do your own research before making any decisions with your money. Stay patient, stay consistent, and I will see you in the next video.